Okay.
Greetings, everybody.
Yes. Hello, piano geeks and enthusiasts. My name is Elmer.
My name is Mark.
And we are
piano.
Marc and Elmer.
Marc and Elmer's
Piano Scene Investigations. PSI. Okay. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, well, I'll tell you what. I've been doing some more cleaning up in the archives back at my place, and just putting things in order. You know, it's much like going out to book sales at libraries and thrift stores and garage sales. It's always an excavation, and I've made some thrilling discoveries and finding stuff even at my in my own house, my own music room. And, well, I found this rather interesting looking score. I'm going to bring it up close so you can all look at it. Yes, it's it's in a different language. And for any of you Russians out there, you'll probably recognize it is in Russian. Everything is in Russian. There's a few type things there in English. This is a score. When I first looked at it, I noticed at the top the Russian lettering, the Russian characters, and then right below it, V. Jalobinsky, which is typed right there, typed. So I did some research, and it is actually the name of a composer, Valery Jalobinsky. Valery. And you look further down.
Valery is a not uncommon Russian name for a guy.
Yeah. It's spelled Valery.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, it is his 6 short etudes for pianoforte, is what it says. This was published by the Rus Rus Music Corporation. It says here, the exclusive distributors of Russian and Soviet music for the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
I guess they were located at 150 West 57th Street in New York.
Yeah, they were a company. Yeah, they were a company during the Soviet Union times that had managed through cultural exchanges to create an outlet for their composers, their musicians, orchestras. I don't know if the orchestras ever came, but the conductors did. But you know, when Van Cliburn won the Tchaikovsky competition, and he brought Kirill Kondrashin over to the United States, and they performed. That was through Museum. Or Amrus. Amrus is American Russian. It was, I suppose, I don't know if it worked the other way, but we certainly, that's one of the ways that we got Soviet period artists and people to come over to the United States. Or, you might remember we talked about this, Frances Carr Glover did those collections, wasn't that the lady's name? Who did those repertoire books of classical music or Baroque music or 20th century music or something like that.
Gosh.
We had it as an extra
book
when I way back when I was studying. But I remember Kabalevsky's, what was it called? Takatina?
Yeah. It's a two-pager.
Yeah, there was stuff like that in, and then there were some other Russian composers. Chernin, I remember there's some things in there of his. And Stravinsky's son.
Selena?
Yeah, Selena Stravinsky. There were outlets, there were connections. It's very odd for people to realize now. Back in those days when Churchill referred, he was the one that used the word the Iron Curtain. We really didn't know what the hell was going on over there. A lot of the time, growing up, nobody knew. Or certainly the public didn't know. And I think for the Westerners to know, it depended on the spy network, or the CIA in different countries were doing. And yeah, it was pretty locked down, pretty locked tight. It started to open, I think especially with Brezhnev in the 70s. And Nixon was president, and there were some better communications and things like that. But occasionally, there was different relationships sometimes in Europe and the Ruskies. Some of the great musicians from the Soviet Union came over and played in Europe. If they made it as far as the United States, they usually asked for stay here. Yeah. But this is the way Oyster Art became quite well known and quite followed in Europe. And there were some other people that came out, and then there were some that went over. There was, of course, Van Cliburn one in 58 or 59.
Something like that.
And then Byron Janis went over.
Byron Janis.
And did some of those wonderful Mercury recordings in connection with the Ambrose thing, I think. And there's some wonderful recordings that he did over there. And similarly, his great influence. Who sounds more like Vladimir Horowitz than Byron Janis?
Byron Janis, yeah.
He had captured totally the ear, the color, and and even the piano, the sound of the Steinway that he probably chose to play. And then how he played it, it sounded very Horowitz. Sometimes it'd be hard to distinguish. If you just didn't know who it was and you heard the performance, well, it sounds like Horowitz.
Oh, yeah.
But was it, or was it Byron Janis?
Yeah.
He was fully developed, very young, prodigious talent. And then as a teenage boy, not a lot, but some, he went and studied with Horowitz for a while. And picked up on the things. But he did some really interesting historical recordings that were released. And there was the Russian label that probably was released through Ambrose called Melodia.
Oh, I remember that.
And there were some really good recordings of things that came through. Lots of Rachmaninoff. Some of these really terrific Russian conductors leading some of these various orchestras, especially in their own repertoire, like Shostakovich, for example. There's a box set that I've got saved on Amazon I've been looking at for a while. One is Rostropovich conducting the National Symphony and all of the Shostakovich symphonies, but even more highly recommended, some people said, is this collection of all, is it 13 or 14 symphonies? 13, I think. Shostakovich.
Oh, there's like 15.
15, is it? Okay. And they're by different Soviet-era conductors with different orchestras. On a couple occasions, I think they were recorded in Western Europe. But the names, there's a lot of famous, really older, famous Russian conductor names in there. I thought that might be a really interesting to get.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Because that's a culture and a sound which I'm sure Vladimir Putin in certain ways would love to restore, but it ain't going to happen.
Anyways.
Sorry, folks, we might have just lost a big portion of our audience.
Oh, that's okay. Hopefully we'll bring them back.
I got a lot of Russian friends.
I want you to look at the score one more time.
Politics, not people.
I want you to look at the score one more time. Because when I looked at it closer, notice right here at the upper left-hand corner of the score, it says repertoire hyphen Vladimir Horowitz.
That's incredible.
It is incredible. It is.
One has to wonder, because the man lived a rather monastic existence.
Yeah.
And Wanda protected that place like those guards in the witch's castle in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes, absolutely.
How did somebody, I mean, was it one of the author guys that have interviewed and written him?
I have absolutely.
How did they get a copy of music out of Vladimir Horowitz's library? I mean, the other thing to think is at some point, I mean, Wando's dead.
Uh-huh.
And of course, this will happen. Look at my library. I mean, I have a huge one here as well. And I always think I don't own this stuff. I'm just holding it in trust for the next people that want to own it.
Well,
but they must have eventually, of course, dissolved the contents of the house. And somebody bought it. And then somehow it ends up in the Upper Arlington Library in Columbus, Ohio.
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
I want you to look at this score. Take a look at this. It is absolutely well written. That the lines are absolutely immaculate. This was a very gifted composer, Jelebinsky. And according to Shostakovich, he was definitely destined to be one of the greats in Russia. And he died early. His dates are, he was born 1913, died in 1946. So that would have made him only 33 when he passed away. It's well written. Now, I did some more digging and background work on this mystery here where it says repertoire Vladimir Horowitz. And I found out that he actually introduced this work to the United States. He was the first one to play it right here in this country. Eventually, there were a few handful of other pianists that took up the work. One that you should all well know, his name was Oscar Levant, who took up the work. If you go on YouTube, there are some uploads there on YouTube where he does perform 2 of the 6. So otherwise, a lot of it is a bunch of other works that he did. There's a 24 preludes that he composed, most of them very short, some of them only 8 measures long. Only 8 measures long, difficult. And, you know, I like to point out that one of the most difficult things to do is to compose a work that's only 8 measures long, and it says everything you want it to say.
Fabian got close to that.
Yeah, very close. But, I know, and much even just as challenging, if you're a pianist and you have to perform 8 measures of a prelude, just 8 measures, you know, you better know what you're doing up there because those 8 measures go like that.
Well, you know, the great master of miniatures was Horowitz.
Oh, yeah.
He was famous for that, especially later on in his life. He played just these little things of Schumann or Debussy, little, explosive little pieces of Scriabin.
Yes.
But they were perfect little nutshells. I mean, that's basically what it has to be. It has to be totally on the mark, 110%, played without fault, and played with great conviction, and you've got 2 or 3 minutes tops to get your point across. And you either succeed or you fail.
Yeah.
You don't have highlights and lower moments that can happen in longer narrative kind of pieces, here or there. And Horowitz really was the master of that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Now, this music, did you play through any of it?
I did play through it.
It looks very Prokofiev influenced.
Yeah,
in terms of the harmonies, the tonalities, and a couple of them remind me of the, what's it called, the Vision Fugitive?
Yeah,
yes.
Vision Fugitive.
A couple of them remind me of that. There's, in the etude aspect of some of them, is to really expand the hand.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of, some leaps and things that Prokofiev would do. First one's in C major.
Yeah, the first one's in C major.
And it's, one might say, I wouldn't say it's polytonality, but C major is clearly the bass or E minor underneath it.
Yeah.
I don't know, does he go to A at all?
Yes.
I don't.
The first movement's a toccata.
Yeah.
A toccata, right away. I think the interesting feature here.
It looks in the piano writing the way it looks kind of like the early piano concerto writing of Prokofiev. In a way. Of cool music.
Isn't it cool music? Oh, I would love to learn one of these days. I've got it on my list.
Good for you.
But it looks like a wonderful work. If you want to borrow it sometime, you can try it yourself.
I appreciate it. We have been trying to make videos since February this year.
Yeah.
And we're not going to necessarily release these in week by week fashion. But we're probably going to record, edit, produce, get it out there. But today, for example, is July 27th?
July 27th, yeah.
This is probably the 18th or 19th video?
Something like that.
Recording, anyway.
Yeah.
Early on, we tried it with the phone. It didn't work so well.
Yeah.
Then we started to use this camera and it worked well. But the problem that we've had is finding someone to help us. And then I have had an old, powerful iMac for my desktop computer, but this stuff all seems to be being made in Windows formats. Mm-hmm. And then for a while we had trouble finding a way to pull it into the Apple world to edit it. Yeah. And just recently we have we'll have her name on our list of films eventually. Her name is Megan Wetzel. She's a really brilliant young lady. Knows how to do this stuff, especially in the line of media propaganda and getting stuff out there. Everything. She's a walking encyclopedia about this stuff. We got it as far as getting the whole very first potentially uploadable film ready to go. And on Tuesday, she hit the export button to put it into a file then I could open YouTube, and very simply she showed me how to load it up into YouTube, and then it would be a film available to everybody. And the program doing the export froze. And it froze. It did not move on, and I tried some things she suggested, and finally I closed the program. And we're not monster tech guys, okay? We want you to spread the word about this show so we get those, how many do you need, 100 million people or whatever?
Something like that.
Whatever the numbers are.
We want the world.
We want to get as big as some of those other guys so we can hire professional video and audio and production people to do this crap, because we have, with the greatest endeavor and the greatest passion, and this guy especially is really into this. He does all the planning, the structuring for the outlines mostly, and comes up with the themes and comes prepared to do so much. And I sit here and just comment.
But he's the vision. He's the visionary. Okay? It was actually his idea to do this.
Yeah.
I mean,
but he really got into it, and I can see.
I like the idea.
And the way this developed, because they ain't seen anything, they may not see anything before this one goes up anyway. This started out with, well, you could tell the story.
What?
Piano lessons.
Oh, it's okay.
They've never heard the story. They've never heard it before.
All right.
It started out as piano lessons that evolved into something else.
Yeah, it did. Eventually, it just became conversations and talks about history and piano technique, pianists.
Look at him making that face and stuff, but he loves this stuff, and I do too. Yeah. My God, we're the kind. We've decided we're going to stay within a 2-hour window based upon holding people's attention, perhaps, and then also if we ever to do online radio releases where we could, but they have to fit into a certain period of time. But man, we recorded some boozers early on. Way over 3 hours, and the lesson started out as an hour and a half piano lesson. And then we got to talking about stuff. And then it turned into a 2-hour lesson, and there was a 3-hour lesson, and then
the 4 hours. I think the latest. I showed up at 1 o'clock, and I think the latest I've ever been at his place, his studio, was like 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
So this thing was like 6 hours.
It was enjoyable.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We had a good
totally
time.
Into the music. I'd be really serious. This guy's a good pianist, and he really is willing to drive himself to do things better, And so work on the ideas and all that. But then we just talk about the composers and the music and history. We love this stuff, and we have an interesting background. We have some of the same books in our library.
Oh, we have a lot of the same books. I was struck by how much we had in common.
How far is Finley from Springfield?
Oh, you're talking about maybe at least a couple hours. Maybe
so I'm from Springfield, Ohio, originally, which historically is a pretty cool city in Ohio. which I won't go into. You can always look that up. But interestingly, there were a lot of famous pianists that came out of Springfield, various ones, including my postmaster's teacher, Elmer Snyder, who became a great exponent for contemporary and avant-garde music. Friends of John Cage and all these great modern composers and painters and all those kind of people. And you, what's your name? Yoko Ono. All those people in New York connected with him. And he was from Springfield. And my dad was a really finely trained musician. His family didn't have the money to send him to school. But Dad, for decades after, I mean, in his life as he went on and got older, the guy could sit down and rattle off Grieg A minor, Beethoven C minor, the Grand Polonaise of Chopin in A flat, things like that. And he could still play them incredibly well. His teacher had been a graduate of Juilliard, who kind of started a whole school of stuff that went beyond his lifetime, because one of my early piano teachers, Dario Greenewald, was a teaching assistant to Ralph Circle, who was the Juilliard graduate. So we had some good stuff going there. But then 2 hours north of me, also in western Ohio, in Findlay,
Ohio.
Tell them a little bit.
Oh, gosh.
They don't know too much. You guys will have our bios on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
So we don't have to regurgitate all that, but we can say some things.
But Findlay, oh gosh, it's a small, it was small back then, okay? It was small. You'd walk through downtown and there's an old gas station, I think, that had been there for decades, and it didn't have a particular name on it. All it had was this big round sign. It said gas. That's it. I kid you not. There was a gas station right there in the corner with a big round white sign that lit up at night, and all it said was gas.
Midwesterners can be famous for that.
Yeah.
I like to talk. Elmer likes to talk too. Yeah. But in general, my grandfather was a perfect Midwesterner.
Yeah.
He'd say, what? And then he had two grunts, one for no and one for yes.
Anyways, across the street from the gas station, there was a restaurant. It didn't have a name on it. It had just one neon sign.
What, food?
No. You're close, though. All it said was, get this, eat. Eat. That was it. Eat. There was no name of the restaurant. It just said, eat.
And then so by the time you drove down the road to the petrol station, you might have a little gas from the food.
But it was the funniest thing. It was the honest thing. I mean, I look at it now. I mean, they all have. I mean, that gas station is no longer gas, and that restaurant across the street is no longer eat. You know, I mean, it's grown some, but it was just a small town back then. We didn't have a mall. You know, all we had was just this little village. And it was called Findlay Village before it became Findlay Village Mall. You know, and all it was just a line of stores, one on one side, one on the other. They had this big, large walkway right in between, and you walk through there. But I tell you, it was delightful during Christmas time. Yeah. You know, because they decorate the stores and the trees and the bushes and things.
There were some earlier 50s vintage shopping centers like that in Springfield. In Springfield, my hometown, unfortunately, in the 70s 1970s for you people was not a great time in America. You know, there was Nixon and then Watergate, and you might need to look those up. You might not even know what that means. But economically, well, the country really suffered. It was a bad decade. Poor Jimmy Carter, you know, he got stuck with the oil crisis. And then the conniving that went on to for the Iranians to hold the American hostages until Reagan won the presidency. But the point of all this was in the 70s, Springfield for a long time, going way back, all the way back to the beginning of the 19th century, had been continually productive and really drew a lot of great talent there, some inventors that created all kinds of cool things. It was a very industriously prosperous town. And it was 3 times thought that it might be chosen for capital of the state. But, as tends to be the case, you Europeans might not know this, but there was an older tendency, and I think a wise one at the time, to separate business from government. So, Chicago, for example, come on, that's a major business money-making center. But the capital is in Springfield, right? So, in New York, there's New York City, right? It's like the leading cosmopolitan, money capital of the world, but the capital of the state is up in, New York or something. I can't think of the moment what it's called. But some town way up there in upstate New York, as far as you can get from New York City. So, because Springfield was so prosperous business-wise, they thought, nah. So, and ultimately, Columbus became the capital because it's smack dab in the middle of the state from everything. But, what I was going to say was in the 70s, things really started to fall. There was great downtown when I was growing up. There were some cool buildings, theaters, and all kinds of things. It was the place to be downtown. Yeah. And it was a bigger city, so there was a lot of blocks to this. Big, tall buildings that showed that there had been money. It still was money in this city. Then suddenly things got quacky, and then the city government decided, we're going to build us a mall. And they put it way out in West Springfield, way outside of town. Bought this piece of property, leveled it, put all this stuff out there with Sears and Penny's anchored either in. And guess who was one of the people that provided the opportunity for it, and also a lot of the workmen who did the work to build it and everything else? The mob out of Cleveland. Ooh. But it was a business adventure, right? It was a genuine business adventure. But, that's what the mob finally did. They tried to get it to more legal kind of stuff, real estate, things like that. And it devastated the downtown. I mean, it's never recovered. I mean, it's nice, and it's got some cool things, but Springfield then, unfortunately, has this tendency that if they got these big, beautiful old buildings and nobody really wants to rent them or use them, rather than worry about the possible vandalism or the uncollected rent or anything, they just level it out, put up a parking lot. Jeez. There's so many parking lots there. And I remember years ago when I lived abroad for a long time, and there was a Springfield page on Facebook. I remember talking with some people, some friends of mine from high school. And I said, it's weird. It's like every time I go back there to visit Dad or just see, I drive around. And everything that I remember as I'm driving around, a lot of it I see in my mind. Mm-hmm. And they all wrote back and said, Springfield exists in our memories. A lot of the town is not there because it's always changing. Europeans wouldn't get that. When I lived in Famagusta, in Cyprus, the height of that place was 300 years after Christ was crucified? And an incredible, at one time it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western world. Yeah. Because of the trade going through. And then the not so much really the Turks, but the Turks, they eventually, in the 1400s, I think, finally turned out the Italians. And that, but I was in a town, in the walled city, where, Leonardo da Vinci came over and helped advise the Italians about how to improve the walls and the buttressing for the eventual attacks from the Ottoman Turks. It's ancient place. And driving a modern car through there, and having about this much space on either side of the rear view mirrors to pass the cars that were parked there. A lot of the world likes to preserve its history. America, as some places, seems always motivated towards the new and the exciting and the changes, and we tear it down. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's one of those things I do. I get off on a thing, and Elmer's usually too patient. Yeah. Well, but anyway, growing up in Finland. That's why I'm a piano teacher. Tell me about your piano teacher.
My piano teacher? Oh, my piano teacher was my mother.
So this boy.
So you guys, all you piano students out there who complain about having to be prepared with your piano teacher, some of you may only have to deal with your piano teacher for a half an hour to an hour once a week. I had to frickin' live with mine. Jeez. So.
But it worked.
Oh, yeah, it worked. Oh,
you became a pianist.
I became a pianist.
Working musician.
Yeah, it was not something they expected, though.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that, she was a very big influence, my mother. Her father was her teacher. So it kind of runs in a family because she has siblings, brothers and sisters that do play. They did play. But basically, Finley was, a lot of the musical talent really did come from Finley. I remember in Bowling Green State University, they used to have a youth orchestra that used to rehearse on Saturday afternoons, and the French horns were from Finley. The bassoon player was from Finley. We had an oboe player from Finley.
Wow.
We had flute players from Finley.
Wow.
I knew 2 or 3 of the string players were from Finley. So a lot of the talent they had at the Bowling Green State University Youth Orchestra came from Finley. Oh, French horn player. We had a French horn player that was from Finley. So we all went there. I played viola rather badly. So, but that's my background as far as you'll probably find out a lot more about us in Finley, as you watch some more of our videos.
And sometimes we will play something for you or try something out, or depending on what the theme of the show is, what we're doing.
Absolutely.
But this is probably more than not going to be a show where we are just gabbing and talking about piano things, trying to keep you up to date on. He's really good about looking into calendars and competitions and stuff, know what's going on. And then both of us we have aspects of our souls which live deep in the past. So
absolutely.
We love to talk about the old times. Well, older than us.
Absolutely.
Way older.
And more about that much later. But while I was cleaning, do you remember this? This is a VHS, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
See, VHS. For some of you who don't know what VHS tapes are, go find a dinosaur to ask. But remember this?
That.
Okay, this is a movie. Yeah. Maybe some of you who are our age remember this movie. This movie, The Competition, starring Richard Dreyfuss and Amy Irving, came out in 1980.
Yeah.
1980.
I was just going to Wittenberg that year.
Yeah.
For my bachelor's degree.
Yeah, and I was still in high school.
Now, one of the things, can I say something that I don't like about piano movies?
Okay, say it.
They don't look real, like in terms of playing the piano.
No, it doesn't.
Now, in his case, I thought Richard Dreyfuss was pretty convincing.
Okay.
The moving around the piano, the kind of physical things that you would see with the pianist, depending on how loud or soft or active they're playing.
Right.
I don't remember about Amy Irving. She looks convincing.
Yeah.
One of the best ones ever in movies was Robert Alda. Alan Alda's father.
Alan Alda,
was his father.
Yeah.
And he played George Gershwin in an original movie.
Oh, yeah, Robert Alda. That's Alan Alda's dad?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And then
holy crap.
he actually did study piano. It was really quite good.
Yeah.
And in fact, he's playing for his Hungarian or whatever piano teacher that Gershwin studied with in New York. And when he's a young man, and he plays the little A major prelude in the film of Chopin.
Yeah, I remember that.
7th or 8th.
Something, yeah.
And that's actually Robert Alda performing on the film. That's him recording it.
Wow.
He played it. He was that decent a pianist that he could actually play it.
So was it him playing Rhapsody in Blue in the movie?
He was like doing the hands and stuff. No, he did not perform anything else.
Oh, okay.
I'm not so sure about what that was and what's his name?
Oscar Levant?
Yeah, because he did a lot of behind the scenes playing,
he did.
especially that stuff, until he showed up on the movies to play it. But no, he didn't do that. But he did know the music well enough that he could approximately, have his hands where it's supposed to be when you're doing things.
Yeah.
And that's the most amazing acting piano playing I've ever seen. Because most of the time, come on, guys, it's embarrassing when you see these things. And plus, there's all this stuff. Come on, I mean, sometimes you have some good sex in the practice room once in a while, right?
Oh, God.
But I mean, come on, most of the time we're working our butts off, fingerings,
absolutely.
notes, repeating and stuff all the time. People have no idea what drudgery the practice is. But of course, we're doing it because as we develop and evolve into like a masterful state, it's like a religious experience or spiritual path, When people ask me if I have a religion, I do follow Buddhism as a philosophical path and a spiritual path. But I say, my church is really the piano. After all these years, when I sit down to practice and just disappear for 3 hours and just I'm working and all that. But piano playing is hard, and
Oh yeah.
competitions are even worse.
Yeah.
And then there's all this romantic
Stuff.
It's like you had.
Let me show you.
I tell you,
Show
as a competitor in competitions, the one thing I always thought was unfair, and I don't mean this to sound terribly sexist, and I don't know if they're still doing it nowadays.
What?
Well, we guys back in the day had to
Yeah.
wear. Nobody was even wearing these Chinese collars or anything.
Oh yeah.
Bruno Walter. We still had to wear white tie and tails when we competed. That was the standard dress.
That was.
Remember, one of the reasons that the Russian that got cut out of Chopin, what's her face?
Ivo Pogorelich.
Ivo Pogorelich. He wore a
Ivo.
leather string tie with a blousey top
Leather
and
pants.
tight leather pants.
Yeah.
And you know,
Ruffled shirt.
the guy's maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but let's say unique and extraordinary talent.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just facilitate.
Yeah.
And enough so that what's her face?
Martha Argerich.
Martha Argerich walked off the jury. When
She was not the only one, I'm told.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
But back in the days, I mean, guys, you know, we wore those stuffy white ties and tails and all that.
Yeah.
That was standard fare. I mean, an open shirt at a concert at the piano.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even do that now. I mean, I like these. I wear these things. It's
Why not?
Chinese shirts, but open, no.
Why not?
It's just that's what the generation I'm from. That's not right. Because if anything, I know what Ellsworth used to say. My postmaster's teacher.
Yeah.
You come to be heard, not seen, or they come to hear you, not look at you. You know, because he talked about some of the most incredible performances he ever saw. He saw Horowitz live.
Saw or heard?
Saw and heard it live.
Yeah.
And he saw Rachmaninoff 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, live witnessed him, live.
Yeah.
And he also went and witnessed Earl Wild.
Yeah.
A couple times at least. He said some of the most extraordinary piano playing he's ever heard from anybody in his lifetime. Mm-hmm. And he said there was hardly any movement on the bench. It's just these fireworks and the beautiful sounds and everything. Look at the videos of Horowitz, especially as he got older.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe once in a while when he was younger, he might raise his hand up a little bit or, you know, have a certain look. But the older he got, the more refined his physical movements were. But the playing was ecstatically extraordinary. Yeah. And he said the same thing about Rachmaninoff. You know, he was just like people used to say that he was kind of like a big, tall corpse sitting on the piano. And then these sounds would come out, which were just astonishing. Of course, he had monster hands, but you would hear oceans of notes coming out. It's like, how can this guy play all those notes? And that's just what I grew up with. You know, a pianist, you convince them from what comes out of the piano, not what they see. And so that back in the days, no offense, I don't know if he's still alive, but he's rather infamous for this Andre Michel Schub.
Oh, he's probably still alive.
The face guy.
Yeah.
You know, the ecstatic face guy?
Well, it was not just ecstatic face, but the hand was going out like this.
Physical
turning
tension.
the head this way, then going out like this with elbows.
There's nobody anything against that, but from my teacher's point of view, that was just all unnecessary. He said anything that doesn't go into the manufacture of that sound that you want, all right, and the purity of the musical idea and the purity of the gesture that will make it more true. Anything else that you do is a waste of energy, and you're cheating yourself and the audience of the best that you can give them. That was his opinion. He was quiet. And he was also very quiet at the piano cutback. And I used to be more physically emotive or expressive. I don't think I'm like that as much now. Because I really prefer for it to really come out of the instrument. Because then people think, oh, you're such a passionate, wonderful guy. Well, I never had a big opinion of myself, just by looks, but apparently when I was thinner and younger and everything, I was apparently drop dead gorgeous to a lot of people, men and women. Didn't realize it. So, but then that makes me want to know, well, were they attracted to me sexually or they really loved my music making? What was the mix? And I think the difference between entertainment and art is the quality of spiritual presence, the transfigurative aspect of the music that happens and how it can affect you deeply in your soul. That's what I strive for, and that's what I think it should be primarily about. So then the competitions, I mean, we didn't have anybody that dressed as, let's put it this way, Yuja Wang's an incredible pianist.
Oh yeah.
The girl can play, really. And she's extroverted.
Yeah, she's very
good for her. And she's got plenty to be extroverted about. Good for her. And I never had any that showed up like that in the competitions. But sometimes these girls would come out, they'd have this split skirt thing that would show the entire, it would fall inside the leg and then be all the way up to her behind on the bench. Well, I was thinking, so what's being judged here? You know? And I really think that in some cases I like the idea of what do they call them, blind auditions, at least to a certain level. And maybe what would happen if you ever did a blind audition all the way through to the top? There was no visual assessment of it at all. I remember when I saw Harold Schoenberg give a lecture one time. At the time I was studying with Ellsworth, I was very excited about the new ways I was learning to play, and it was the old, one might say, kind of a floating arm technique thing, Leszczynski school stuff that I was taught. And he kind of just whiffed it away. He said, the great artists, he said, they all play differently.
Schoenberg said that?
Yeah, he said they all have way different techniques and everything. It's not, one isn't any better than the other. And that was Schoenberg.
Oh,
that guy had an ego the size of Connecticut. But when you look, I mean, at people and how they played, there's that one video, I don't know if you sent it to me.
Yeah, what is
that professor at Indiana who demonstrates how different pianists played and the sounds they got.
Oh, that was on YouTube. Yeah, it was, what is his name?
He's at Indiana, right?
Yeah, he's at Indiana. I can't remember.
Oh, no, it's not that one. I saw another one with a guy's kind of Japanese name, but no, this was a different guy. We'll look it up for you and we'll find it out. It's very interesting because he does it very
well. I know, I saw
the movements and the sounds. He demonstrates Rubinstein, Horowitz, Arau, some of the old guys.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Arau was very interesting because he said it just kind of spreads.
It's Norman Krieger.
Was it?
It's Norman Krieger. Yeah, Norman Krieger. I remember that video. Yeah.
That is a very interesting thing. Because the way that he described them and stuff, it's very interesting, and you can see how there is a connection between the Klang ideal, the sound that they make, and the way that it's manufactured. And he talked about in the way that he showed it is like Claudia wrote kind of like spread around on the keys and moved in them like an amoeba or a spider, and very, very close and things like that. And it's one of the things that Ellsworth loved about it was the sound. And as big as the sound could get as he wanted to make it, it was never harsh.
Yeah.
It was always this enveloping thing. And then Rubinstein had this kind of, one of the things that the guy shows in the video is the arch in his hand.
Yeah.
He got this kind of German, interesting Polish Jew, who could have been a very kind of Slavic or Russian exponent of piano playing, but totally trained in Berliner, North German kind of technique, And in the old videos, you can see the way he's playing Chopin. There's this beautiful arch, and the way that he plays, and of course it was very physical. Played from the shoulders, so it doesn't need to be very demonstrative. But then I thought he was really hit on Horowitz when he described him, and I saw this because he was showing the D sharp minor prelude, etude of Scriabin Opus 80. And he sat a little lowish to the piano, Horowitz did. You can see him where his belly button is relative to the key, because that's often a physical measurement that one uses, I do, when I'm working with students to see where they're done yet, which is a energetic point in Chinese medicine, or the what do you call those energetic things in Indian medicine? Chakras. But in general, I've had it told me you want to have your belly button right about even with the keyboard. And then you play not so much from way above and certainly not below, but then there was a little. But the interesting thing with Horowitz was he was clearly sitting a little down a ways. But what Krieger said, if that was his name, is he plays from the solar plexus. Yeah. That really strong. He said the guy must have had incredible muscles right here. because he said this is the way that you control it and you can make those huge explosive sounds without the obvious physical flailing about, and he said it's just, and then it reminded me, when I studied martial arts kind of things with Tai Chi, all comes from here, from the Dongyan, in this area. And anyway, that's a really cool film. We'll try it. We'll try to look up the address and post it on Facebook so you can watch it.
Absolutely.
But I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
this is what I do to poor Elmer. I get rolling on the side path, and then he has to pull us back onto the main path.
I give this movie about 3.5 stars out of 5. It's an okay movie. The music's interesting. I spent most of the time. I actually watched it just about a couple of days ago, and all I could do was, boy, I remember when watching this movie the first time, I couldn't name half the pieces of this thing. I could not. But now that we're older and wiser, I can name just about every piece on this thing.
His name Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss.
He's a good actor.
Oh, he's a fine actor.
Is he dead?
I don't think so. I think he's still. I think they're both still.
And he did that, Mr. What's his face?
Mr. Holland's Opus.
Yeah, for example.
Yeah.
He also wasn't he in Jaws?
He was also in Jaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was actually a really famous theater actor.
Oh yeah.
And lucky in the 70s, he started to find his way into movies.
Yeah.
And he was that good, but he actually brought kind of a new, refreshing, I wouldn't say it was new, but certainly a refreshing theatrical power and earnestness and energetic presence. There's a difference because I've seen how movies are made. Oh my God, the actors who succeed really well with making movies well.
Yeah.
You have to commend them for their, we were talking about miniatures earlier on.
Yeah.
I mean, those shots sometimes are only seconds or minutes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they can take hours to set up.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll do several takes. Mm-hmm. But in and of itself, they'll be doing something. And sometimes it's amazing. They're just looking for a response.
Mm-hmm.
Cut!
Yeah.
It's all about, it's not really, and this is what actors who get burned out in Hollywood, a lot of really good ones, they go back to New York to what they'd say, well, I'm going back to New York to act.
Yeah. Oh!
Because Hollywood, it's all about posing
and
doing it, or just that short little moments, but it has to be so perfect and so convincing. And that's what makes for really great actors, a great movie, because when the movie comes out as a whole story, that's really due to the director's vision and the editing that they do. They pull these different pieces together and they make a composite story about it that makes it work. But when you got somebody like, especially Richard Dreyfuss in there, you get some of your work done for you by the actor because they just bring in this. It's like what they say. That some people said that sitting near Horowitz when he was on stage and the people were sitting behind him because it was overfilled at Carnegie Hall or something like that. They said it was like sitting next to a power station, next to electricity. Yeah, you could just almost feel the energy, and you don't want to get too close to it because you can get burned.
I know. The force was actually felt physical.
Yeah, I think so. Physical. I know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes, I wasn't a huge concerto pianist. But when I played some really great chamber pieces, I played Beethoven Third, for example. When you're rolling and you're moving in it, it's like an unstoppable force.
Oh yeah.
It's just, and there's a great feeling of just like riding, like when Harry Potter gets on his broom, and it just takes off. Yeah. That's kind of what it feels like.
Now, back to the movie. Some interesting things here. All right. After watching the movie, I realized that, you're right. Some of the playing looks really fake, but I actually found that their competitors in the movie
they are pianists.
were actually looked more realistic.
Oh.
Actually looked more realistic, the competitors. But I did some background checks on this, and there is a list of the pianists that actually played in the back.
Oh.
Okay? And
do we know any of them?
You might know of one or two. Okay? These are practically unknown pianists. Some of them one of them you cannot even find on the internet. It's one of them. Okay, now the first one you'll probably know, Daniel Pollock.
Wow, yeah.
He
actually tall cigar smoking guy out in Los Angeles.
Daniel Pollock. Yeah, shout out for Daniel Pollock.
Hey.
Not many people know this. When Van Cliburn took the gold medal at Tchaikovsky, Daniel Pollock was the one that took the silver medal.
Yep.
He was the guy. He had quite a career. Now, comes the names. There are 4 more names here. Okay, let me know right away if you've heard of any of these guys. All right. The second name on this list, Eduardo Delgado.
Not really. I mean, I'm not surprised, but do you know who he was?
I didn't know who this guy was.
Sounds to me like a cheesemaker in Mexico.
No. Well, he's actually still plays. He came up with a few recordings on EMI. He does play some Chopin, but his I guess his real forte is playing Ginastera.
Ginastera?
Yeah, and apparently Richard Dreyfuss, if you saw the movie, there's a scene where he plays Sonata No. 1 by Ginastera.
Right.
And I would imagine it was probably him.
Huh.
There are a few.
How they found these people? Like, were they students at UCLA?
I have absolutely no clue.
Something like that.
But Eduardo Delgado, you could find videos of him on YouTube where he's still playing. He still plays. Still a fine pianist. Still has the chops. Now the next one here, Ralph Grierson.
You guys know?
Yeah, you know.
Are you out there, Ralph? Are you listening right now?
Yeah, I have never heard of this guy until I looked this movie up to find out the credits of who were playing. But Ralph Grierson, I guess he still plays. He does a lot of Gershwin.
Yeah.
A lot of Gershwin.
Good for him.
And he still has chops. He plays Rhapsody in Blue. He plays Concerto in F.
Wow.
He plays the I Got Rhythm Variations.
Those are good.
But he just as well. He does his own improvisations on Gershwin tunes as well. There's one particular video on YouTube if you want to check it out sometime. He does a Gershwin medley, and it's all him. It's all him. Oh yeah, making him still.
Go get him, Ralph.
Yeah, go get him. Now the next name, Lincoln Mayorga.
I got a coffee mug from Mayorga Coffee, by the way. That's a women's cooperative coffee thing from Central America. And the ladies, they created a business and they make really good coffee. Mayorga Coffee. The Aztec one and the Mayan one with the white cover on it is really good stuff. He's had it before.
Oh yeah, very good. Now, Lincoln Mayorga, he has a few videos on YouTube as well. Now, on the title of his videos, I noticed the actual channels. He goes by the profile name. I can't remember the profile name now. I'm sorry. But I guess you can look it up if you look up Lincoln Mayorga. His last name is spelled Mayorga. And I know, but I couldn't help seeing the words music and health next to his profile.
Oh, interesting.
So music and health. He has some lovely music on his videos.
Yeah.
Some of it, it creates sort of a satie-like ambience, basically.
It's his own music?
I don't know if it's his own music. He plays a few works that are by other composers. I have not heard of any of the composers he's played. He has, for instance, a Prelude No. 5 by Rosenbaum. I don't recall the first name. I think it might be Robert Rosenbaum. But it's something like that. But he plays a few works on YouTube. Now, the last name on this list that played in the movie, Chester B. Help me out if I get this last name wrong. Sviatovsky?
Sviatovsky.
Yeah, Sviatovsky. Okay. It's spelled
Chester,
Chester. Last name is spelled Swiatowski.
So he's Ukrainian, or could be Ukrainian Polish, from the old world, the family. Not likely to be Russian, because usually those skis are Ukrainians, I think.
Yeah.
Sviatovsky.
Anyways, Chester is nowhere to be found on the internet. Nowhere to be found.
Poor guy probably went to the front to fight the Ruskies.
So, have absolutely no clue.
Sorry,
but,
people, you're going to write some shit to me. I know about this.
If you have any whereabouts about Chester Sviatowski, let us know. Let us know. I mean, it would be interesting to find out who this phantom pianist is. I would like to know.
Okay.
But anyways,
come on. I mean, the guy's actually recorded some good piano playing for that was a major film back in
the days. Well, at least for pianists.
Did it win any awards or something?
No, it didn't.
But I mean, it was a big film. I remember we went to see it.
In the theater?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember it being in the theater.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Sure it was. No, it was big. Well, it was Richard Dreyfuss. He was big time.
Oh, yeah. So was Amy Irving.
Yeah.
But it was practically an all-star cast.
Hot little pistol back then.
They had Lee Remick. Lee Remick played
she was
the teacher.
Satan's mother in Omen, right?
Yeah, the Omen. Opposite Gregory Peck. Yeah.
Oh, that was scary.
Yeah. That was scary. That was scary. I mean, the dog scenes.
Oh, man.
Dog scenes. Every time that dog appeared.
You guys don't want to see this.
Yeah,
that was horrendous stuff back in the day.
Now, the end credits show us that Lalo Schifrin wrote the original music for the competition.
Wow.
So Lalo Schifrin,
he was
composer of the Mission Impossible.
Hungarian, right? Hungarian Jew.
Something like
Lalo Schifrin, I think, who came and did some good work in the movie industry.
Oh, yeah. So we have Richard Dreyfuss, Amy Irving, Lee Remick, Sam Wanamaker played the conductor.
Yeah.
Played the conductor.
Yeah, I like
Otherwise, I don't know any of their names. But that was the competition. I don't know if this thing ever made it to DVD. I haven't been able to locate it.
Oh, it probably has.
But it'll be interesting.
But it's like nowadays, nothing makes it to DVD. It just goes to streaming.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's not on. I tried to look it up on YouTube, but it's not there either. But anyways, that is the competition. It's an interesting. They declared it. I don't even remember the name of the competition, but in the movie they say it's the Super Bowl of piano competition.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I mean, if you guys never saw it, and you're young and you're romantic minded, it's a great film. It's a romance.
Yeah, it's a romance.
It's built all around a competition.
Yeah.
Well, just off the top of our heads, let's remember some other films we could recommend. What was the one that Shirley MacLaine did? Madame Sasatska?
Oh, yeah, Madame Sasatska.
That's a British-based, although she's an American actress, but she plays this kind of old grand dame Russian piano teacher who has this very talented Indian teenage pianist, older teenage pianist. Yeah. He's for real, right?
I do not know if he's for real. I have the movie. I'll bring it over sometime.
It's an interesting film. I mean, just simply because actually, for all of her spiritual stuff, Shirley MacLaine was actually really a great actress.
Oh, yeah.
And she's the sister of, it's a totally different name. One of the great male actors of the later 20th century did, come on, why can't I think of it? Super famous, big Warren Beatty. She
is the sister of Warren Beatty?
Brother and sister, yeah.
I did not know that.
Both of them extraordinary talents.
Oh, yeah.
But so we got Madame Sasatska. You think of any other ones? Movie jobs or music jobs? There's some good ones now.
Yeah.
The one I mentioned, the biography of...
Five Easy Pieces, Jack Nicholson.
There you go.
That's a very good movie.
There's that George Gershwin bio that was done just shortly after he died. I think it was done in the early 40s because Gershwin died in 38 or 39.
Are you talking about the Robert Alden?
The Robert Alden.
Oh, it's just called Rhapsody in Blue.
Yeah, okay.
Rhapsody in Blue, that's all.
And then there's some great piano playing. What's the one where Dane Andrews plays the blind conductor who can go get surgery and get his vision back? And he lives with... It's a Cole Porter. No, who's the guy that's from Indiana? Famous songwriter. Really, really famous.
Famous songwriter.
He wrote tons of stuff.
Harold Arlen?
No. It's not. I don't think it's Cole Porter. It's no. He's from a little farm town in Indiana, and he was super famous. Wrote all kinds of stuff. He wrote Starlight. His name is almost there. But anyway, there's a great movie with Dane Andrews and Laurence Olivier's wife at the time, the one. She was famous, a British actress where the guy created this special lighting for her face because she had some accident stuff, and he was able to create her face so it would look beautiful in the bright light. But the movie is based in San Francisco, and he's a composer. Hoagie Carmichael.
Hoagie Carmichael.
Hoagie Carmichael's the roommate. He and Dane Andrews' character. Hoagie is the composer and the popular guy in the clubs in San Francisco that plays his music and sings. It's a great character. He's a very funny guy, and really wonderful musician. Dana's the serious composer who was blinded because of an accident, but now there's a surgery that he could get if he goes to New York, and he can see. And this lady, wealthy, independent lady, is in love with it, but she doesn't want him to realize that. But she actually is the one that creates the scholarship that he's destined to win in order to get to New York. The only problem is that when he comes back to San Francisco, now that he can see, he has a choice of every flim-flam around him. Of course, he ends up with her, the thing he loves her.
I don't know this movie.
You do know this movie.
I do know this movie.
It's a real concerto that was written for the movie. It lasts about 13 minutes. And Arthur Rubinstein and Eugene Ormandy.
Night Song.
Eugene Ormandy and Arthur Rubinstein
played a black and white movie
in Carnegie Hall. Yeah, it's pretty cool because you get to see them. They were short little guys, And Dana Andrews walks through the backstage, and they're on stage ready to go out and do the performance. And they actually do a little acting.
Yeah, they do.
And
they just laugh off the stage. Laugh off that scene.
But I'm sure they had a ball.
Yeah, I'm sure. And he actually plays it.
What's the one where Clara Schumann is played by
Katharine Hepburn?
Katharine Hepburn.
Song of Love.
Song of Love, and the music's all played by Rubinstein, I think.
George Bollett.
George Bollett.
George Bollett.
Anyway, there were some famous pianists that did work out there. Rubinstein played some stuff. Jose Iturbi.
Did Song to Remember.
And then I'm thinking also, look up films featuring, or he was one of the co-actors in it, Oscar Levant. Because what's the one where he does, it's all based in Paris, and it's the dancer guy. Who's the famous dancer guy?
Oh,
Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly. American in Paris. Oh my God. Yeah.
That is one of the most extraordinary musical movies I've ever seen. Because anything with Gene Kelly, people, if you don't know who Gene Kelly was, Gene, it's a guy. He kind of followed Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers as the next generation of dancer, and he introduced more modern stuff and gymnastic aspects to it. But the guy was an amazing, and they said he was a wonderful guy, but he was a perfectionist. And the choreography, they said the people and things that went through on it. The American in Paris, Oscar Levant is a pianist. He gets a chance to play the concerto in F. Yeah. A couple movements that are portions of it. Does he play the Rhapsody in there as well? But then he does the songs. Yeah. He plays the piano while this French guy actually sings some of the songs that English singers was famous for. And then Gene Kelly is the dancer, and there is this incredible ballet at the end of the movie. This is the best place to put it. It lasts for like 15 minutes because that's how long American in Paris is. It's a complete performance of American in Paris, and a ballet that in its way is telling the story of some of the characters in the movie, because it's him and who's the French actress who could also dance and sing with him. She's very famous.
I know she's famous.
I can't think right now, but
is it Caron?
She could have been Leslie Caron.
Yeah,
what was that? She was new, really. She was kind of introduced in that film. It's one of the most breathtakingly stunning. Human beings did this. This is not CGI stuff.
Oh no,
this is total 100% human blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah, and it's just simply one of the most beautiful and amazing 15 minutes of music and dance and ideas and choreography and everything that I have ever seen in my life. And I love that old stuff like that because there was no CGI. There might have been a little editing record something or something like that, but it was basically just do it until you get it the way you want it.
Exactly.
And that's it. And there was nothing to monkey with.
Oh yeah.
It was either what it was or it didn't work.
I would like to see behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you're right about blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah.
But I remember we spent a little time went off on that. But there's some really wonderful movies featuring classical music.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And some of them are less egregious than others.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I especially would take these competition movies whenever you see stuff like this with a grain of salt, because people, that's a romanticized version of what's really going on.
It's,
you know.
Yeah, the angst, the brooding, it's too much.
I think just as a comment, I'm very interested that these South Korean pianists seem to be doing so well in the world right now.
Oh, yeah.
I saw there's a guy in Australia, they have a huge prize in a couple of years. Management, some concerts in places in the world.
Yeah.
It's another South Korean guy that won it. Different.
Oh yeah.
Than Young Kim.
Yoon Chan Lim.
Yoon Chan Lim is the guy that won the Tchaikovsky. No, the Van
Cliburn competition. Yeah.
And then there's another guy who won something else, and then recently there's another one who won.
Tchaikovsky?
No, the Australian one. I forget what they call it. But it's interesting because what they're writing about these guys, who are their teachers?
Yeah.
What's the culture that they're being raised in? Because one of the things that all of the people are raving about is to greater, and I think Yoon Chan Lim, yeah, I mean, when you hear the guy play and the colors and the nuances and the ease with which he plays the most difficult.
Oh yeah.
This is going back to the days of Morris Rosenthal, and you know, some of these amazing, spectacular pianists from the turn of the 20th century that were titans. You know, Rosenthal actually was connected with Liszt, but then you had some of these other folks that came from that time. I mean, Horowitz, one might say, was kind of, they often would say the last romantic, but meaning that he was kind of one of the last ones to spring from that school of playing and extraordinary control and voicing all that. And this in general is what they're saying about these South Korean pianists.
Oh yeah.
That when it comes to colors and the vibrancy and the integrity of playing, and they're all young. I mean, wildly young.
Yeah.
Like Yoon Chan. It was 18, right?
Yes.
And fortunately, the guy said, despite the fact that he plays like some of these ancient masters now, he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I've got to fulfill these obligations, from winning and everything." But he said, "I'm going to go back and study more with my teacher for another 3 years or so." You know?
Yeah.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, it's well grounded.
You know, so there's still obviously work to do. And imagine how much better. And it's not so much that it would be like super noticeably better, but in terms of how much deeper he can go in the water without imploding. If you understand that joke, if you know what happened in 2023, it's just more extraordinary. I mean, the closer you can get down there to the Titanic and survive it, and take us to those depths of color and sensation, musical stuff. I mean, thank God, it's really interesting when you see it that in the turn of the 20th century, there was a huge, and I'm not saying this in racist terms at all because it's true actually historically. There was a huge Jewish preponderance of Jewish musicians that came out of, for example, Odessa, and who was the violinist Leopold Auer. Who taught Ivets and all these different fabulous violinists that came out of there, or out of Russia and Slavic. Nathan Milstein, for example, ended up in England, which is why he's not so well known in America in comparison, but just as amazing in a way as Ivets was. Different, more serious repertoire. The best Bach partitas and sonatas I think I've ever heard were by Nathan Milstein. And then all those pianists that came anywhere from the Ukraine up into Moscow, trained in St. Petersburg or Moscow or down in Kiev, for example, or Odessa, and just innumerable ones. And then some of them went by way of Leschetizky in Vienna. Yeah. But there were so many musicians who were Jewish at that time, and it was a great a tradition. And I mean, one might say that classical music world was a place for people who may have been shut out from other aspects of making a living in societies. Nazis did terrible stuff, and there were collaborators, as people, we don't need to mention them, but there were collaborative countries and governments which supported them. Anti-Semitism was rife in the entire world, and one might say it never goes away, but the classical world provided a place for these people to really do something. Mm-hmm. And they did it with such vigor and such talent and such skill. You know, and perhaps in some cases, as Horowitz said, you know, he wanted to be a composer. He came from a reasonably good family. But then the Soviet Union he just had that kind of smile. And they said, well, you know, then you didn't follow composition. No, I had to make money. Composers don't make money. I said I had to play. Right, same thing happened to Rachmaninoff when he came on the press. He had to play. He'd been primarily, by the time, he was well established by the First World War. And he was a conductor and a composer. But then he had to leave and lost everything. He had to play for his money. Did well. Had a big house in Beverly Hills. But it was the Jews, and then at some point it seemed like there was, and still is, a very strong Chinese presence. Yep. They're really devoted to playing. There's some really great players. Yu Zhou-Wang's not from China, though, is she?
I'm not sure.
Was she when she was a little tiny thing? I remember the videos of her.
I know.
She was a little brilliant
9-year-old.
But she eventually studied with Fleischer and stuff like that, right? I don't know if she's originally. But of course, one thinks of Long Long, and there's some other folks, good Chinese ones. I was never a big fan of Long Long myself. Yeah. But some good people that came out of it, but just now most recently. Yeah. And I haven't seen any ladies yet. Yeah. But some of these young guys coming out of South Korea, yeah, that's like where everybody's attention is drawn for the piano talent in the world. And the extraordinary thing is 18, 19 years old and playing like a mature Moiseievich or Rosenthal. How did they do that?
And they're still young.
And they're young.
And they're still young.
They also have the ear and the color and the depth of technical ability for all those nuances. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when people remarked, they still are putting up YouTubes of his performances from the Transcendental Etudes. Yeah. Wilderjacht and some different things like that. Crazy music. Yeah. And there's what's the one piece what he's doing where he just smiles? At
the Furfoulet.
The Furfoulet. It's just like going through it and just smiles and
what's he smiling about?
It's bewitching playing. But that's the best word for it. Really, like Samantha did that thing with her nose and just made everything sparkle tremendously. I think that's very exciting, and I'm glad to see that not. Look, I don't have much tolerance or interest in the competition scene. Yeah. I did it when I was younger, and I did reasonably well, but I never did the big stuff. That really was my orientation. I really wanted to be an academic and teach and do things like that. I more or less succeeded with those avenues. But competition, you know, and everybody talks about it. Some people call it a necessary evil, you know. But what I really... Because then there's some fabulous pianists that came out. Like, who's the loud, crashy Soviet pianist that got free finally? Short guy. Won the silver and one of the things. And come on, he's really super famous. He ended up Ashkenazi.
Oh, yeah, no, he won gold.
Did he?
Yeah, that's quite a story. You're talking about the Tchaikovsky competition, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one where he shared it with John
Ogden. Yeah, he shared it with John Ogden from United Kingdom.
But to be honest, I mean, when I did, you know, I have his complete Rachmaninoff Concerti and the Rhapsody on record, on LP. Yeah. I've not been led in more recent decades to follow Ashkenazi so much. I know he turned into a conductor and apparently won a great merit, and I have heard a couple of his performances as a conductor. But in my mind, Ashkenazi came from that kind of metallic, monstrously industrial school of pianism that developed in the 20th century in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
I mean, Gilels also could play that way. He had a powerful monster tone and all this. But he interestingly applied his incisive talents to classical music.
Oh, yeah.
And played it with such a Beethoven, with such authority, that there's a certain profound, maybe a little powerful, but a profound elegance, which I think, and I remember, one of the most amazing performances of Waldstein, for example, is what did I just call it? What it is called? The pianist.
Emil Gilels?
Yeah, Gilels.
Yeah.
Or the Appassionata, for example.
Yeah.
I never followed some of the other ones too much when I was growing up. Well, you wouldn't know because we talked about this in previous unreleased videos. We didn't have access to a lot of Soviet musician stuff growing up.
No, not much.
It was mostly the American recording market and those kinds of things, talents and so forth. And then Seraphim and Angel from England started to come in a little bit. Once in a while there'd be some melodious that would show up, very rarely.
Very rarely. Most of them were Tchaikovsky.
So Richter never really was in my view until I was in grad school, probably, that I started to hear about it. It could also depended on where you lived. Because Jonathan was from the East Coast, and they would have had access to more things. He lived near New York City. Tower Records had everything that existed in the world. But if you didn't, back in those days, it was hard to get because there was no Amazon. You couldn't buy things online and stuff like that.
No internet.
No internet.
No internet.
Boy, when you hear your grandfather tell you stories about back in my day, there was no internet. You had to walk 25 miles to the record store to find a good Beethoven album.
Yeah.
That was true.
True. That's the truth. That is literally the truth. Yeah.
And some of the stuff about the big fish that got away and all that could be a little bit stretching, but
yeah.
I mean, we had a good orchestra at Springfield, very fortunately, and there was a good record store there. But you got what you got. Basically, what they decided was they decided that the market would eat, what they would consume.
Absolutely.
So I don't know a lot about some of those rescue plans, but I am really happy when I saw his name is
Yun Chan Lim.
Hard for me to remember. I'm sorry, Oriental.
It's okay.
So I have plenty of Oriental friends, but always escapes me. Yun.
Yun. Y-U-N.
Yeah.
Yun Chan.
C-H-A-N.
Yep.
Lim. I saw an article sometime. I don't know if I sent it to you from Slip Disc with doing the Liebrecht. Somebody had written in and they said, "There's all these incredible Asian pianists coming up," and he said maybe they should start adopting Western names or something so it's easier for
the rest of people to remember. Oh boy. Yeah.
I knew a guy in Wittenberg when he was there, and he loved this.
Yeah.
He actually preferred it. His name is with some kind of tones in it.
Yeah.
John Wayne was his name.
Oh.
But somebody had said that sounds like John Wayne. It's John Wayne. Yeah, John Wayne. I like John Wayne. My name is John Wayne. And he loved that. He was crazy. He was a very intelligent, scientific guy. Going to Wittenberg, and everybody called him John. He said, "This is John Wayne." People go, "Howdy, partner." He would just die. He would love it. But his name was something that we couldn't pronounce because Chinese don't know. But no, it's the thing that I'll shut up after this, but the thing I'm really excited about is that there's a very young new generation of incredibly, not just Ashkenazi pounding, just really overwhelm the orchestra. It's a big battle, it's a big fight, somehow a reflection of the Cold War, it's us or them kind of crap. It's that older world of beautiful playing, really gorgeous, extraordinary virtuosic abilities. In fact, his Rachmaninoff third performing he did with Marin Alsop was one of the most fleet and colorful in terms of bringing voices and lines and things out, knowing when. Well, this is really accompaniment of the orchestra right now.
Yeah.
It was the most extraordinarily beautiful, balanced, chamber-like performance of the Rachmaninoff Third I've ever heard from anybody. I know I'm going on here, but I'll shut up now.
Okay.
But I am really happy that that's the state of music, or can be, in the 21st century when, the planet's melting down and, we don't know if we're going to be here another 10 years or not, but at least there's some things that are continuing, that are really worth it. And people, you want to pay attention to these people. Look, it's not the same word. When we talked about, look where Elmer comes from, and where I come from.
Yeah.
And we managed to forge a life as musicians and survive. Make a living, sometimes decent, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But we're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, things changed too, because then the guitar became the preeminent instrument for everybody wanted to learn. They all wanted to be rock stars.
Yeah, I remember it.
Because, music's easier to play, but it's not to say that some of those guys can't play the crap out of the guitar. Pretty amazing. But that became the predominant instrument that people were studying, and it I don't think it's a racial thing. I think there is probably some factual information that there are more pianos going into homes of Asian American people, of Asian American families, than there are of white, Caucasian.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about black, and because, like in England, a really wonderful example is that family of there's a pianist and a cellist, and they make it a trio, right? Violinist.
Oh, I
forget their name. If I got out my BBC magazine, I could find it, but they're all black.
Okay.
Musicians are really terrific, well trained. I don't know all their specific history, but
this is in England.
In England, yeah.
Wow.
Big time. Big time. Each one of them in their own areas is really, really good. It's like, wasn't Yo-Yo Ma's family? Was it a Chinese family or Korean family where one is a very famous conductor. He did a lot of work in Paris. And then one's they had a trio. There was a pianist and a cellist and a violinist. I'm not sure. I think the pianist might have become, what's his name, Yun Ho Chung or something like that.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy became a conductor.
Big time.
Yeah, there was another one
French
that was a violinist.
Paris opera.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
And there was a
I do
cellist
remember
in
just
it, too.
slightly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember
They
that
didn't
name.
have quite the sisters didn't have quite the
Quite
high
the
as he did as
stature as the other one.
You Dr. Paris opera. That's
Yeah.
really high. But I'm sorry that didn't. That's because I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But maybe I'll dig up because one of the black musicians in London is on the cover of one of the BBC magazines.
Wow! Yeah, I do remember.
But I don't know. But it does seem like that the Asians are really mostly looking seriously at piano study.
Oh yeah.
And interestingly, I know a lady up in Delaware, just above me here. She said that her son is studying. She said what they're not accustomed to is this idea of weekly piano lessons, because she said in Korea, kids go every day.
Okay. Yeah.
After
See.
school,
Yeah.
they go every single day.
Yeah.
For a short lesson. And it might just be like, and you can figure it out. Maybe she teaches 4 of them in an hour for 50 minutes, just to check them up on this and that. She still gets paid good money.
Yeah.
But the kids then actually are being supervised by the teacher throughout the week, not by a parent who may have never studied the piano but is encouraging them, but doesn't know jack about it.
Yeah.
And there's something like that where you're seeing your colleagues all the time, and you get to see a teacher, and it's just because of a very kind of thing like that. And maybe then you don't have to practice so much at home initially, but you just do enough to keep it going, because you do have to demonstrate to your teacher the next day
exactly
that you've got something accomplished. It's a very interesting system. I mean, you're not going to be able to charge $60 an hour. You can charge $60 an hour, but you're going to get paid $15 from 4 different families.
Yeah.
To make the money. But then you've got full-time job throughout the week doing all that. So this is one that she said she was hoping to find some kind of situation where maybe her husband or son could take a couple lessons
just a week.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So get that kind of support. And you think about these different for instance, I know when you read about Arthur Rubinstein and these various Jewish musicians, the families that they grew up with, music was a huge deal.
Oh yeah,
They were all like
very
Bach
big
families.
deals. Yeah.
You know, there's music all over the place, and it was expected. You know, it was kind of a social accomplishment, even for the girls.
Oh yeah.
So Rubinstein talks about how his older sister was taking piano lessons, and she wasn't all that into it, but you know, it was a social thing for the
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Still in the 19th century. And he used to go over and stand at the piano and reach up and reproduce the notes by ears that she was playing. And it was eventually, once he could sit on the chair and play, he was playing better than she was, and he'd not taken one lesson.
Yeah, remember, they were going to make him a violinist.
Yeah,
they were
that's a
going to
good
make
story.
Arthur Rubinstein a violinist.
They brought home this little child-sized violinist for him to learn how to play.
He took it by the neck and went smash.
Destroyed it on the chair.
Smash the violin.
You're like, what is this? Crash! And he tells, I don't know if he got paddled for it back then, but very clearly his pianist said, he said, well, at that point, I made it clear that I was going to be a pianist, and my parents were persuaded by my decision.
I love that story. Oh, dear.
Well, we're rolling along here, okay?
We are
right?
rolling okay. All right. I wanted to bring forward as well the latest from the Marston label.
Ooh.
The Marston
Tell
label.
them about that.
The Marston label recording company is dedicated. Yeah.
M-A-R-S-T-O-N.
Yeah. M as in Mary.
Yeah.
A-R-S-T-O-N. Is a recording label dedicated to reviving historical recordings. Now, historical recording, I'm talking about pianists from the old school, violinists from the old school, singers, opera singers from the old school.
Fundamentally,
it's very
a majority of them are people who've been gone long enough that most people don't remember them.
Yeah.
But very clearly, when you hear their performances, these were world-class shakers.
Oh yeah, these
really
guys.
Amazing talent.
Yeah, and remember, they didn't have electronic dubbing. They had to get these performances in one shot. You only had one chance.
This is like with the American in Paris, the ballet stuff that we had filmed and stuff. But yeah, back in the old days, people, one of those horns that you sang into and music all came into that. They had big monster horns. It was like the size of an ancient shark that could swallow you whole. But that was what you made your music into.
Yeah.
And it got into a little teeny spot like that, where it came out and it was grooved into a wax model to make records from.
Yeah.
I don't even understand that technology.
I don't understand.
How do they take the sound waves, they go through the horn, and it
There's
somehow magically goes through the needle, it carves into the wax cylinder the sound. I mean, what's going on to embed that into that makes it
playback?
Playback. Do you understand that? I don't. Somebody needs to explain that.
Yeah, it's probably all math and physics.
But I mean, it's magical when you think about it.
Absolutely.
I mean, just thinking about that, even back in the 78 days.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing in the 78 days, like you were saying,
there
was no editing per se.
Nope.
So, because it was during the Nazi time, really, that they came up with magnetic tape. And then it wasn't really commercially used until after the war.
Yeah.
That was the way that everybody recorded. I mean, you did it through this monster horn onto this original plate, very heavy.
Yeah.
They're metal inside. There must be something about that.
Absolutely.
But then how they figured out how to put the ultimately plastic in, I don't understand.
I have.
What is that? The magic that makes
it's a miracle.
That sound reproduced. I mean, Thomas Edison was doing the first one.
Yes, Thomas Edison.
I don't understand how that works. I've never thought about it before until now.
Now I know.
You drop a needle on a piece of plastic.
Yeah.
And it reproduces sound. What the hell is that?
I have absolutely no clue.
Well, go ahead. But
anyways,
this is amazing because I've heard some of the things. He was really sweet. He and his wife bought me. I've become later in life, say the last couple decades or 3 decades, well maybe 2. A great fan of Wilhelm Kempf. And they bought me a collection of all of his original, what they would call electronic recordings, which means in the tube, down the hole, onto the thing. And it's a wonderful set. And then on top of that, they use real modern, cutting-edge reproductive measures to give you the best
possible
version
quality.
as possible.
Yeah. But anyways, I want to bring forward this. This is Robert Goldsand.
Yeah,
Robert Goldsand. You remember this name?
I want to get a copy.
Robert Goldsand. Take a good look at him.
He was a Jewish player from Vienna, right?
I think so. I'm not sure, but
I think he studied in Austria. That's where he first came from.
Yeah.
Probably had to immigrate.
Yeah. For some of you young people that don't know Robert Goldsand, I would imagine to say that he was probably one of the earliest of the Supermen.
Yeah.
As far as a pianist goes, his technique is unbelievable. He eventually became the son-in-law to Leopold Godowsky. He married his daughter.
Man.
He is the first known pianist, possibly, to record a selection of some of the Chopin, Godowsky etudes, and you'll get to hear him play one of those on this recording.
Have you listened to some of it?
I have listened to all of it.
Wow. Good for you.
There's 3 CDs in this thing, and I've listened to all of it. I mean, rarely do I sit down and listen to an entire CD. I sat through 3 CDs in one sitting.
So what's unique about the play?
The simple ease, the power behind that, the backbone. Much less. The technique was. It seemed he plays like he had the technique the whole time. He plays other works in here. The Deflator Mouse in the Godowsky arrangement. There are Chopin etudes. There are, let's see. Well, here, let me pull it all out. He does some Beethoven sonatas. Let's see. Oodles and Oodles of Chopin. He's got some interesting. Clementi, the sonata in F sharp minor, Opus 25,
When did
number
he record
5.
that? Makes me wonder who did the Clementi first,
No
him or
kidding.
Horowitz?
It's a good, interesting question. And here's a name I don't know about: Guarneri. Guarneri, Sonatina number 3, in the G clef. There is the Chopin Rosenthal arrangement of the Minute Waltz, where he plays the right hand in double notes.
I have an ancient performance of Rosenthal playing that.
Well, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. Here's one, the Mozart Gigue in G major, Kershaw 574, ballet music from Rosamunda in the Rudolf Gans arrangement. Here's a Mozart sonata in D major, number 17, Kershaw 576, Beethoven, number 24, F sharp major, Opus 78. There's even the Schumann Novelette, F sharp minor. It says abridged here. He even does the toccata, Schumann toccata. That one he did live. And if you've noticed some of these performances, if you get the recording, like I said, he's playing some of these in live, and the music becomes so moving that the audience actually starts clapping before the end of the piece.
Wow.
And that was from a Chopin waltz. He did that on a Chopin waltz. There's oodles of Rachmaninoff here.
Wow.
He's got Chopin variations and a few preludes here from the Opus 23 and 32. CD number 3, the 6 Paganini Etudes by Liszt. He does some Chopin, Polonaise C minor, Opus 40, number 2. There's a couple Prokofiev pieces, Prelude in C, Opus 12, March in F minor, Opus 12. There is some Albéniz, the Triana from Iberia. There's some Handel here. He does a single movement from the Suite number 2 in F. And he does Jesu Joy Man, desiring to close off the entire collection. So, yeah.
Well, it looks like his recordings, from what I've seen, are anywhere from, there's some mid-50s into the 70s, primarily. He was born in 1911, it says. This is interesting. He started out on the violin, kind of moved towards the piano. then got entered into the Vienna Academy of Music, studied with a professor there, and then from the age of 10 he became a pupil of Hedwig Connor Rosenthal, the wife of Marc Rosenthal.
Wow.
And thereafter studied with Rosenthal. Some sources suggest that he also studied for a while with Emil von Sauer as well in Vienna.
Ooh.
But he was born in Vienna, came from there. He's a very handsome young man.
Oh, yeah.
Incredibly good-looking guy. And then he went on to a really extraordinary career. I don't see where he must have been. 1938 compelled him. The Nazi Anschluss of Austria. He left in good sense. He headed for New York in 1938. So he was 27 years old, but had already conquered Europe by that point. He came over there. But there's some extraordinary things, yeah. There's Paganini Etudes. Yeah. Here you go, the Symphonic Metamorphosis on the themes from Fledermaus by
Fledermaus, that's the one.
You know, I really, I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to get a copy myself.
Yes.
But,
Robert Goldstein, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
So we've been doing a little promotion, which hopefully someday we'll actually get some support for ourselves. But yeah, if you're interested in the historical stuff, this is a really good company to support. It's called Marston Records. It's made in America. And basically the way they do it is that they find people of means to put the money behind a project to resurrect somebody's work. And there have been some amazingly generous, quite a number of folks that have put some money. It doesn't take a huge fortune to do it. No. It's a certain amount of money, depending on what's there, and you know, to transfer it from the original sources into a really high-class digital one, and thereby preserving, hopefully, the better, or, so you don't have to reuse the tapes over and over, and you can then probably help try to preserve something. But it's a really laudable thing. There's another record company I have really appreciated. I don't know if they're still doing things. Is it Nimbus?
Nimbus?
Are they still making records?
I have absolutely no clue. I haven't heard that name in a while.
Nimbus Recordings is cool. There's a pianist whose name was Shura Tchaikovsky.
Shura Tchaikovsky.
He was a student of Joseph Hoffman. And fame on a big scale eluded him until he became an older man. He's based in London. I don't know if he's still alive, but it was basically the latter part of his life, from maybe his 60s, 70s, because he plays like the old-timey guys.
Oh, yeah.
Extraordinary technique. I mean,
very old school.
Some of what he was famous for playing is some of the Hoffman pieces, the Sanctuary, things like that. He's a little guy. Yeah, he's it's not too tall, and he's a little guy. And I always loved it when he bowed, because he looked a little bit like a penguin. He went part of the way down and bowed like that with his hands at his sides. And when he comes out, he's very spry, very energetic, very quick at the piano, but really a little on the short side. I mean, his legs are just straight out down to the pedals, and then just flying around the keyboard. But miraculous, incredible playing. I've got a ton of his CDs. I've got like this many on my shelf, just under the name Tchaikovsky. Oh, wow. And what was cool is that he lived in London in an apartment, and the piano that he had access to all the time was an upright. It was probably a Bechstein or something really wonderful. And then, he could go and work on grants and stuff, but that was fine enough for him. And he also, I don't remember what he did earlier on in his life. He had some kind of work that he did, managed to survive for a long time. He's gay. I don't think he was ever married, but, quiet, genteel man and all that, living in London. But he finally got picked up, I think, because there was a fascination, about, it's like in the 70s or 80s when they discovered Nirachadze.
Oh, yeah. It was in the 70s.
Ford Foundation put some money up behind those records and brought him out. These are different people. Nirachadze is a kind of an oddball thing.
IPA picked him up.
But Tchaikovsky's like, an exponent of the Godowsky and Hoffman kind of play. And the cool thing with Nimbus is they wanted to do recordings the old-fashioned way. They had this palatial home, very kind of, British upper class, Downton Abbey kind of place. I don't know if it was that big, but there's a picture of it in their old recordings. You'd see that. They called it, I think they even called it something abbey. The house, not that it was an abbey, but it was a big, 3-story, big mansion. And they had this room where they did the recording, and it was apparently wood, we call it with all the pieces of wood you put on the floor, parquet. So the real thing, the real wood. And then just the nature of the room they thought was really lovely acoustic space. They had a big piano in there. But then they recorded singers and chamber music and stuff. I don't know if they ever did like big symphony things. I don't know. But because what they wanted to do was to use really good quality microphones, and they were using, of course, they were doing LPs at that time when they started. Then they moved into CDs. But the idea is to recreate the older recording situation, which went through as little editing as possible. So the artist would come in and play, and it would get printed. Is it okay? Is everything's all right? Everybody's happy? Sign it off, and it goes to print. There's stories famously about Moisevich, Ben Moisevich, who used to come in London, and he had his coat on and his bowler hat and everything, and smoking his cigar. And he would come in, and let's say he came in at 5 o'clock, and laid his coat on the chair, put his hat on the chair, put his cigar still burning in the ashtray on the table, went over and sat down at the piano and started to warm up a little bit. Okay, I'm ready. And then extraordinarily, and they said, okay, well, what do you want to start with? Well, let's do this Chopin Etude. Zoom. You need to do that again? No, I don't think so. What's next? Zoom. One thing after the next. And they said, in many cases, one take. And it was flawless and beautiful and amazing. Yeah. And they said, he would get up after an hour. This is like in the 1920s, right? Yeah. They'd hand him a check for $5,000
for the 1920s.
For an hour's work. He'd put on his coat, put his hat on, pick up the cigar, relight it, and walk out of the
Oh, God.
That's what those guys could do back in the day, And you think about when people had to put music onto those 4-minute sides on 78s. You don't have time to screw around and make a lot of mistakes.
No, you didn't.
You either get it right and move on, or,
Yeah.
And I think they probably tended to work with people who were very solid, very predictable, and, solid players. And so Tchaikovsky comes along, and that's the way he likes to work. Because, he practices a bit. But he also said, in my professional life, I never really practiced more than 3 hours a day.
Oh,
so that's more than enough for anybody to know what they're doing. And so he didn't like to spend hours. Now, Rubinstein was famous. Yeah. Not that he would make boo-boos, but Rubinstein liked to, start out. They say that sometimes he'd show up after dinner, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, he'd play, start working on things, and they would record everything he's doing. And then he'd take a break, smoke a cigar, and he says, let's try it again. Between the cigar, I don't think he drank anything like cognac or anything, but he smoked. So the best ones would happen between 1 and 3 in the morning. That was when the real magic happened. And he was famous for these overnight. His son, John Rubinstein, talks about going with him when he got a little older. He says, it was amazing. He said, it's just my father and me, sometimes not awake all the time, and the recording engineers and stuff, and otherwise the whole world's asleep. And then after midnight, my dad finally hits that magical space and just starts recording. So some of the best stuff happened after midnight.
Wow.
And that's the way Rubinstein did it. But then people like Moisevich, these guys,
hours work.
economical, $5,000 an hour. I can put that up. I'm the best paid pianist in the 20s.
That's true.
But Tchaikovsky would do that. He would go into the palatial home in England where they did this stuff, sit down and then rattle off some amazing performances like some of these Hoffman pieces. I want to learn a couple of those, but I've never really applied myself to them, and they are really phenomenally difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, just to achieve what Yun Chen Lim can do with that kind of delicacy and stuff, that's what it needs. Because Hoffman himself recorded, and that's what they sound like. But that was Nimbus Records. And I think that's exciting. I don't know if they're still doing things, but they were trying, what they said basically, they wanted to bring the heart of the artist closer to the people without a lot of mechanical interference. That was their philosophy. And I think definitely with those Tchaikovsky recordings, they succeeded. They're fabulous things. He does some transcriptions and some things. And some cases, they said, most cases, there was never more than 2 takes.
Wow.
And it wasn't necessarily because of a mistake. It was just, I think I can do it better. You know? I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
What next?
What else? Okay. How are we doing? I don't know.
I brought some stuff too. I don't know if you got space for mine this time.
Okay. Well, I wanted to give a shout out here for who's got a birthday today.
Oh.
Today, we have Ernst von Dohnanyi. Today is his birthday. And let's see. It says here, it is his 146th birthday. Born today in 1877. And anyways, if some of you don't know who he is, probably his most popular work is that Rhapsody in C major that made the contest list, for high school kids to play. But I went and got this. It's Complete Rhapsodies and Other Works for Solo Piano. I got this. This is Dover.
Dover, that's what I thought. It looks like Dover.
Yeah, it's Dover.
Where'd you get it?
I don't believe it or not. This was the last copy over at Graves.
Oh.
This is the last copy. Take a good look at it. It's from Dover. Okay, it contains the Complete Rhapsodies. I didn't know that there were actually 4 of them, but apparently there's a Passacaglia, Opus 6. There's the 4 Rhapsodies, Opus 11. Winterreigen, Opus 13. The Humoresques in the form of a suite, Opus 17. The 6 Concert Etudes. 6 Concert Etudes. I've tried some of them. Those are hard. Variations on Hungarian folk song. There's a pastoral on the Hungarian Christmas song, The Angel is from Heaven. That's all in this wonderful little book. Nice little picture there in the front. My first introduction to Dohnanyi was that Rhapsody in C major from the Opus 11. It's number 3. Wonderful work, but at the time I didn't know there was actually 4 of them. And the other 3 movements, they're interesting. I mean, they're what you would expect from Dohnanyi, who was taught to play the piano in what we now call the sort of the Golden Age tradition, the grand style, almost a regal, majestic style quality to his playing. Apparently, he was quite the force in the piano teaching world in Hungary. Let's see, I have a few facts here to talk about. It says here, he studied music with his father, who was a mathematician, amateur cellist. Later, he would be with learning lessons from Karl Forstner, who was a local organist at the cathedral. At age 17, he went to the Royal National Hungarian Academy of Music and studied the piano with István Toman, who was a Liszt pupil. And he had taken composition lessons with Hans von Kessler, who was a cousin of Max Reger. Interesting. So while he was at the academy, he published his first piano quintet in C minor. And Brahms was so impressed with it, he actually organized a recital for its premiere in Vienna. Dochnani eventually graduated in 1897, and he was less than 20 years old when he did. The story has it that he didn't get to complete all of the courses. He just wanted to get out. So he took the exams and passed. So he graduated. Let's see. He also says, it also says here, he took lessons with Eugene Dalbert.
Oh, Eugene Dalbert.
Jean, how you say it?
Eugene.
Eugene Dalbert. Okay. He made his
He
London.
was famously short guy, pianist.
Yeah.
I don't know if, I mean, the name is French. I don't know if that's where he came from, or it could have been Rhine, what do they call those people? The town in Alsace-Lorraine, maybe, or something like that. He was a student of Liszt.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
And then
so.
he was married to Teresa
Carreño. Yeah. There's a story in the Harold C. Schoenberg.
And she was quite a bit
pianist.
taller. She was a statuesque lady.
Yeah.
But he must have had something.
They had separate. Oh my God. Oh God.
Come on.
Oh jeez. Anyways, they lived in the same house, and apparently Eugene Dalbert and Teresa Carreño had separate practice rooms, one on each other, opposite sides of the house.
Wow.
And while Teresa was practicing, one time, Dalbert burst into her practice room and said, quickly, Teresa, my child is fighting with your child." So whatever that story was. Anyways, it says here Dochnani made his debut at the Queen's Hall in London, playing Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto. 1898, he finally made it to the U.S. playing the same concerto with the St. Louis Symphony.
Wow.
So, finally in 1901, he completed his first symphony. Let's see, 1920, he became music director of the Budapest Philharmonic. That same year, this is in 1920, he performed the complete works of Beethoven in 1920. Could you imagine? Let's see. As director of the Budapest Philharmonic Orchestra, he promoted much of the work of Bartók. He is also the organizer of the first international Franz Liszt competition.
Really?
Yep, the very first one.
In Budapest.
In Budapest.
Yeah.
So eventually, while he was here in the States, he was a professor over at the Florida State University.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard from word of mouth, though, that he did make his way in Ohio.
Yeah.
So from time to time, I hear his name over at Ohio University down in Athens.
Oh.
But I've also heard his name in Oberlin.
Yeah.
Oberlin.
Yeah.
So he did make an appearance over there. How long did he teach? I had absolutely no clue.
I studied with a woman one summer. I met her by way of my ex-wife at the time.
Yeah.
So she'd been her piano teacher. Her name was Olga von Til. She came from a upper-class Hungarian family in New Jersey. Quite a serious musician. And when she was a young lady, she went over, I would say it was probably college years, to Hungary. And she studied with both Bartók and Ezra Dochnani. And this would have had to have been before, obviously, Second World War and such as they immigrated. But interestingly, I thought she studied composition and piano.
Yeah.
Well, she studied composition, with Bartók, right? No,
Yeah.
she studied composition with Dochnani.
Oh, gee.
And studied piano with Bela Bartók, which I thought kind of interesting.
Yeah.
She was really some teacher, really an interesting person. And then later on, when she came back to the States and was established, she actually taught in New York City in the Steinway building as a teacher there. And Bartók's son, Peter Bartók, had the studio upstairs above her.
Yeah.
She used to talk a lot about Bartók, but I've really developed more respect for this man over the years as I've gotten to know about him. And looking at this music.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
incredible.
It looks interestingly because it's like a wedding between
Liszt
Liszt virtuosity and Brahms's structures.
Exactly my
Brahms's
thoughts.
compositions. It's like I've never seen anything that quite well. It clearly has things that look very Lisztian in terms of the rhythms, or they just remind you of some other pieces. But harmonically, in the way they work out, and especially some of the structures, thirds, sixths, and a lot of that stuff, thick playing. And actually, the first piece I thought was the ballad, but I didn't realize it. It is a Pascal. It is a Passacaglia.
Yeah.
And it really is, and it's 28 pages long, and it's rigorously. I mean, it's interesting. The harmonically it changes, and it's not always the same because there's a huge pedal point moment for a while in it. But I would say the other composer who shows up in my mind, especially the Passacaglia, and some of the stuff I've been looking at, I wouldn't say this is the first time I've ever looked at the music, but I wouldn't say it goes as far afield as Busoni. Later on, but there's something Busoni-ish about Passacaglia for sure. And some of the way the stuff lays out. I mean, Busoni was interesting, right? I mean, he was never a student of Liszt's, right? Actually came of age as Liszt was getting older, but he was a great admirer of his stuff. It kind of took the mantle of Liszt over after he passed and continued that tradition. Egon Petri was his greatest exponent, a Busoni student. And then Gunnar Johansson studied with Petri and also knew Busoni. And I had some experience with Gunnar because he ended up residence at the University of Wisconsin. And it was that lineage. But yeah, this looks really very interesting.
Yes, it is a very interesting book. Very interesting. Now, I also have here, some of you teachers might know this, but this is Dochnani's Essential Finger Exercises for Obtaining a Sure Piano Technique. Do you have this?
No, but I've not heard of it. I've never heard of it?
Okay,
you gotta show me.
Let me show this to you, okay?
This guy is obviously a through and through pianist and composer. I mean, really,
some of these things here.
Well, I've heard Howard, my master's teacher, Howard played a piano quintet or sextet.
There's a piano quintet in C minor that he did.
Yeah, with the string quartet and the piano, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he played it with the Parati Quartet in Madison when I was there.
Now, according to his biography, there are two piano quintets. I'm not quite sure what key the second one was in, but the C minor one was early work he did while he was still in school. Now, this exercise book, apparently there was while he was teaching, he was trying to teach his the importance of piano technique to his students, and he later found out that for the students who were trying to perfect their technique, they spent too much time trying to perfect their technique. They didn't have enough time to work on repertoire, and that's why he came up with this book. And so they could spend less time on developing technique and just build technique quickly, but at the same time they wouldn't have to spend as much time building, and so they had more time to work on repertoire as well.
This would be interesting.
So, and it has, some of them are pretty finger busters. I mean, there's points where they work on double notes where you hold one key down, and then the other four fingers are working on double notes. It's really uncanny.
Well, this reminds me, as I look at it, if you know the Brahms 51 exercises.
Oh yeah.
There's some aspects of that, but then French guy, not Hannon.
Isidore Philippe.
Yeah. Because what this has in it is where you're holding part of the hand on the keys, with the keys down, and then manipulating some other fingers at the same time. You have to be careful to do that, I think, with a lot of relaxation and everything so that you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it can lead to carpal tunnel stuff and things like that if the wrist doesn't stay flexible.
Flexible, exactly.
You have to learn how to do it. And speed is not the point initially.
Exactly.
It's the individuality of things. But you also have to understand some things and have a teacher that could advise you about some of this. I would say that You have to have somebody that knows about forearm rotation
Mm-hmm.
and the horizontal movement of the wrist, like moving the elbow to back up the quote-unquote weak fingers on the outside of the hand. You should never be, in my training at least, especially since Ellsworth, Leshatitsky talks about this. I mean, there's sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
You reach out with the fourth finger, or you have the fourth and fifth doing something while these are doing something. That's rare-ish.
Oh, very rare.
And you don't want to do it too long.
Right.
Because in general, Leshatitsky is, you want to have the forearm behind the hand as it's
aligning
playing.
the bones.
Yeah.
It's basically
Make sure that you've got that back up there. And that's something that I really finally got. I mean, I had good training from Dr. Wynn and Howard Karp and some other folks, Ms. Montel and such. But it's when I got to Ellsworth, I was postmaster's degree, and he basically tore me down technically and rebuilt me. It's kind of like 6 months.
Which we'll get back to later.
Because the first 6 months that I was with him, I really was relearning how to move and play, doing these hand-on exercises and various things like that, and little charity exercises.
Yeah.
Like you've been talking about those little pearls, like these little 8-bar, 12-bar, and 16-bar exercises, and just getting them to where they were perfect. Yeah. With just the balance and light. Because what he's aiming at is, and ideally, between your mind and your heart, perhaps the soul involved as well, you hear inside yourself the sound that the music is representing. It's what it has to be. That's the ideal. Germans say Klang, ideal. It's the ideal sound that you want to make. And then what you learn is a vocabulary of movements that will realize that. You also have to deal with aspects of the piano, how stiff or not it is, its voice and all that. But it's a marriage of the mind and the heart and the imagination, and then just simply knowing the most efficient way to create that sound and make it happen and put it all together. And I learned that from Ellsworth, but he was a great teacher to study with, because ever since I studied with him, I've never had a piano-related injury. Yeah. Never. Earlier on in my life, occasionally I had some problems, as many pianists do, because I was taught differently. Yeah. This kind of stuff, I would say only that this is why you need a teacher. You need someone to watch you and advise you so you don't do stupid things. I was the only, there was one guy who came, he's already a professional professor from California, and he was quite good, big, tall, big guy, to be honest. Like, it was this silver prize under Van Cliver.
Daniel Pollock?
Yeah, he was kind of like a Daniel Pollock guy. He didn't smoke, but he just reminded me, he was a big guy, big hands, big guy. Yeah. He managed to get in and out with intense study in the summer of the doctoral program at Boulder inside of 3 years, I think. Did it 2 academic years and 2 summers. That thing. I then did it because I just was ready to get done, and I did all mine in 3 academic years. I think his name was John. Yeah. And then there were 4 there was a total of, I think, 6 doctoral pianists. Yeah. The other ones always, at one time or another, were out for a while because of piano-related injury. And John and I never seemed to have that problem. And I was grateful because of the teacher. Really, himself had great teachers, and then he'd taken a special interest in anatomy and the physical nature of playing the instrument. And in a sense, going to that micro-universe that makes us athletes, optimally. Yeah. What do you have to do to make yourself that way? And there has to be work like that going on in South Korea. Mm-hmm. Whoever those teachers are that are getting them to play the Rachmaninoff third so poetically. I mean, a lot of people attack that thing like a lion and a lion hunter, Yeah, absolutely. There's performances like that, which are very exciting. Horowitz is very exciting. There's different years that he recorded that thing, at least 2 famous recordings, right? Yeah. But the third one, you get a very youthful Horowitz, the one with Albert Coates, the very first one. Yeah. I mean, What was always great about Horowitz is, and he's from that old school stuff, he's looking for the inner voices and various things, bringing stuff out, which is just interesting. Maybe it doesn't have great relevance or not, but a lot of the old-timey pianists, they were good about that. They would find those alternate voices and things to keep the music more interesting at different levels. But and I've said this a few times already, this show, it was delightful. It was delightful.
Oh, yeah.
It was beautiful. It was exciting, but it was delightful. And anyway, this is really cool. I'd like to find a copy of this.
Okay.
Find out if it's still available. And plus
This one?
collected works, I think so.
I'm sad to say, this is out of print. So if you ever find a copy of this at a book sale or a garage sale or
I do a search on Amazon to see if anybody shows up with a copy.
Yeah, you'll be hard up because it's out of print the last time I looked. So, but
Dover, are they still around? Dover still around?
Oh yeah, Dover's still around.
They were a great source for a lot of music. Back in the day when the choice was either Kalmus, which, or like my very first Beethoven sonatas was Kalmus.
Yeah.
And then I thought I really got along when I bought the Dover edition, which is edited by that famous Shaker.
Yeah.
And then I got the Madison, and Howard said, "Oh, you should own the Henley. Come on, that's the best one, the modern."
Yeah.
That or Vino Urtext, which I actually like a lot.
Yeah.
The orange, reddish orange books. Those are wonderful, but holy God.
Oh,
sometimes, I don't know about nowadays, but those were, even in the days, were expensive. And we Americans, we were a little spoiled. We had, Kalmus was the cheap one, and we had our own great editor for a century, Schirmer.
Sure. Yeah.
But then, they were what they were. And then there was this post-World War II movement towards pure scholarship, and it's getting back as close to the manuscript as possible. And I think a lot of that was partially due to the flow of German-trained musicologists that came to the United States, supported their work.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I think the Shaker is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But I also have, I think the first, or maybe the whole complete sonatas, edited by Hans von Bülow.
Oh, yeah.
Those are very interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a lot of
footnotes. Exactly.
With very, the guy had experience, and he was one of the greatest pianists of the later 19th century. Married Liszt's daughter. He got her before her father did. Extraordinary man and pianist. I mean, he brought the Tchaikovsky B-flat minor concerto and played it in Boston.
Yeah.
Was that the world premiere?
That was the U.S. premiere. Actually,
I thought
it is the world premiere.
And it was dedicated to Anton Rubinstein's brother, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Who said it was unplayable.
Yeah.
And so Tchaikovsky contacted von
Bülow.
Yes, I could play this.
Yeah, so it's dedicated to him. It's actually dedicated to him. Then, so.
And Tchaikovsky came over and directed it.
Yep, he sure did.
Him and von Bülow did it in Boston for the first time.
Yeah.
But, so Dover is not a bad source for finding things, because in some cases they went to some interesting sources. Bachgesellschaft, which and the Polish editions of Chopin that came out, the Paderewski edition. Eventually, because of copyright business, Dover was able to reproduce those.
Some of them.
In less expensive, the real beef and potatoes of the repertoire.
Oh yeah.
All the great works, the Polonaise, the waltzes, and all that kind of stuff. I've got the whole Paderewski edition as well.
Yeah, lucky.
There's a lot more there.
Oh yeah.
But and then there's some Russian editions that Dover reproduces.
Oh yeah.
Of some music from there, which are really quite good sources. Yeah. So I'll put a little plug in before we get to the next one for IMSLP,
Oh yeah.
which is also called the Petrucci Library, Petrucci Library. If you don't know about this, it's an extraordinary online library, massive. It does. It's like $24 a year to have access to it. I don't know, but I think you can have access to it without paying anything, but then they know who you are and they catch up to you. And if you want to do endless copying and everything, you need to say, come on, it's $24, $2 a month, you know. And I've been doing it for several years now. It's well worth it because I got interested in a project a few years ago when it was at my other house. I was just curious. I thought partially it's because I'd known some works written by other composers that I thought, oh, this is really nice. You know? And I started to look at the whole history of the nocturne. You know, that was started by John Field, the Irish composer, pianist who ended up in Tsarist Russia, court pianist. And then Chopin got his ideas for the form from John Field. And then it goes from there. In the IMSLP, there were over 500, close to 600 nocturnes in the library. And I had some time back in those days. Very slowly, I went through and I looked at every single one of them. Jeez. And I came up with selecting a little bit less than 300 that I thought, this is interesting music, this is good. It's, you know, pianistically worth something. And I think, didn't I, at least one of the shows that I did, you guys, there'll be stuff I'll put up, but during the pandemic I did some online recordings called Concerts from the Minor Corps. Yeah. Those are available for free on YouTube. But I'll find out the information, put it up there. But I thought one of them I did was just nocturnes. Yeah. I don't know if I did two of them. It might have been I was planning on doing two, but it was like from Leschetizky. I did do John Field, and then I did a Leschetizky transcription of a John Field one. Czerny. I played, I think, a Czerny nocturne. And then there's some others. And I have a book that I put together, loose leaf, from that library. There's some other ones. And that's a side project I have, is to probably do recordings of it in that way and make, you know, not necessarily to be commercial purpose, but just to have it. But that's a really good source for music too, especially depending on where you live and such, and if you have access to a good printer and $24. They do control some copyright stuff based upon the nation that you live in. Yeah. The U.S. just recently reduced it from 75 to 50 years after death. Mm-hmm. So long as nobody in the family still holds claim to the copyrights, we can get copies of things. I used to wish that I could go up to Canada and go into the computer and register from there to get things, because they already had 55. We had to wait another 25 years for the guy to be dead to get access. And finally, you know, we changed the law. But you should look into it. I mean, just take a look. You can look by composer, by format of the music. What you want? Piano trios. You want? They have everything. They have choral anthems, organ music, operas, orchestra parts. There's a tremendous amount of stuff uploaded by the Ruskies in Russian language. Wow. And then there's a lot of people who use that as a self-publishing base for their own compositions. Cool. Many of which are really quite nice. I've done some choral anthems by some people that I found in the past who were present-day composers, and they created them on some music score thing and then put it up there for people to have access to. Because when it comes down to it, you want to go through the expense of publishing it, hoping that somebody discovers it at some point and would like to do it, or just put it up there so anybody can have access to it, and maybe your piece will get played. You know. So.
Well, anyways, I want to close off the Duck 90 segment. Not very many people know this information about what happened to him at the end. Uh-huh. So one of his famous recordings was his very last one. It's actually a memorial recording. My first experience with it was signing it out from the Delaware Library. And it was a vinyl record with him on it. And he plays, you know, a couple of his compositions. He did a arrangement of a Strauss waltz. He also does the Beethoven's 32 variations of C minor. He also does the Moonlight Sonata on the thing. And the story I heard about it is absolutely heartbreaking. It was his final recording, and the studio was cold. He says he kept asking for them to, you know, they had a heater or anything, but, you know, they were just the technicians were just too busy doing their own thing and didn't listen to him. And so the fingers were hard to keep warm while he was trying to record, and which would explain some of the technical parts were a little bit unsteady. But from those sessions, like apparently he caught a cold, and the cold didn't get better. He developed into pneumonia, and that's how he passed away.
Was he in Florida when he died, or no? He was somewhere else, right?
I think he died in New York.
Yeah, and he's
passed away.
Buried in New York, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, yeah, he was still a good, strong guy in his later years. I mean, he was even giving an interview. Now you can find his interview on YouTube. It's really interesting because the interviewers ask him about his childhood experiences in the music world, and he talks about going to a recital of I can't recall who was performing, but one of the audience members, he looks over, an older gentleman walking in and trying to find a seat, and everybody's like looking and watching him walk in. He later finds out that gentleman was Franz Liszt. So I thought that was a big... Oh, yes, I forgot. The pianist that was performing that day that he went to see was Anton Rubinstein.
Wow.
So Anton Rubinstein was performing that night, and here comes Franz Liszt walking down the aisle, sitting down, and everybody's like gasping and craning their necks, trying to find out who the guy was. They wanted to be Franz Liszt.
Wow.
And he was just a little boy then. He would have been like maybe 6 or 7 years old at the time.
Those would have been some days, huh?
Oh yeah, that would have been.
I mean, we still have great composers and musicians and heroes in our day, but
oh yeah,
at least from an American perspective, we live in a pretty... I mean, we're not a huge country geographically. Canada's bigger than we are, but I think we have more livable land mass than they do.
Yeah.
It's... I mean, and when you're in Europe, I mean, it does feel a little bit like this, because, you know, interestingly, when you travel to Germany on the trains, they got the cities and stuff, but a sizable amount of Germany is beautiful, green, open land, a lot of it's farmland, and forests here and there, and villages. It's a city. It's a small city. But when you walk through the older part of it, you can mostly walk through all of the city, including the university area. There's some stretches here and there. I mean, it gets spread out, but you don't have to have a car. I mean, but definitely when I lived there, I could get all around the whole city, and I walked up to the cemetery where Liszt is buried, and some of the great Wagner singers are out in there. And you get this feeling that the world's a little smaller.
Oh yeah.
You know, in places like that. Just think how easier, well, it was harder because I had harder time to travel. Liszt managed to do 10 years in horse and buggies between London and Moscow, and Rome, and Scandinavia. You know, just unbelievable how painful and exhausting it would be. Anyway, so did we do a good show today?
I think we did. This is a little bit more than 2 hours. I think you're approaching the third.
Well, I think we're about 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
We got started about 3:35 or so.
Yeah.
But we finally, because we're going to edit out a little beginning of it. So, anyway, we should say our goodbyes so that the video editor doesn't get confused about where the end of the show is. We did forget and leave it run, and she says, when did you guys actually finish the show?
Well, before we close, remember to look up marstonrecords.com.
Yes.
It's an excellent label.
And if it's possible, the next show, I'd like to show some show and tell stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
sure.
And, and look up what we mentioned was the IMSLP.
Yeah.
And just look that up. I think it's .com.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll...
What does that actually stand for? International Music Score Library. What is the P?
Public. I don't know.
Okay.
IMSLP.
I don't know what it is.
It may not be an English-based But that one, and then there was one other thing I was thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
What we talk about?
Don't forget, last Monday, the 24th, was Ernest Bloch's birthday, 143.
Oh.
Born 1880, 1959. I wish we had some time to talk
this
about it.
week?
I'm sorry?
Monday this week.
This past week? This past Monday?
Oh, we might talk about him sometime.
Oh, I had some interesting information.
I have some recordings of his, the Priority Quartet, which is in residence in Madison.
Oh, yeah.
They recorded a bunch of his stuff. And I played, Howard played.
Yeah.
It was a piano quintet. I have the recording.
Oh, wow.
With Ernest Bloch. Really good stuff.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, his piano writing is actually quite good.
Was he Hungarian?
I'm sorry?
Was he Hungarian as well?
Switzerland.
Swiss, no?
Yeah, he was Swiss.
Well, the other thing I thought I would invite us to do, because let's do this next week.
All right.
Maybe first show.
Okay.
I like the little show and tell. Let's do that 10 people to the party.
Oh, the 10 people to the party.
So we want to invite you guys now when you get to see this movie.
Yeah.
We'll probably have done our 10 people before this actually gets up to YouTube. But tell them what the idea
all right.
is.
So the idea was, all right, if you were going to throw your birthday party
or anybody's
birthday party, name 10 composers you would like to invite to your party.
And if you want to go on at length, I know Facebook.
And find out why.
Why would you invite them? I mean, in some cases it could just be obviously, but we've actually done this exercise before in films which we would consider archived, which probably aren't going to be released because we had so many problems.
Yeah.
We're idiots. I wouldn't even say idiots savants doing this. We're idiots when it comes to the technical stuff.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we've got some sympathetic people who are trying to help us now. We'll hopefully get some stuff up there. But it's a really good exercise because he came up with a very interesting list. I don't know if the next one's going to change or not.
Oh, it's not going to change.
And
it's the same. It's the same.
I came up with 2 lists.
You came up with 2 lists.
One had to do more with people who would probably interact more easily with each other, and that would be interesting to witness. And then the other one was, there's going to be a hell of an argument at this party.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And then beyond that, I think in the future, it would be 10 performers.
Oh, God, that would be a tough one.
Or let's just keep it strictly to our discipline immediately.
Yeah.
10 pianists.
10 pianists.
That you would like to... I mean, for me, it's more about inviting these extraordinary minds and abilities to come and sit in my living room and just talk about things, life, music, performances, conquests, who knows. And one of them I thought, I won't tell which one, but one of them I thought I'd be more just an observer, just, make sure they got coffee, tea, drinks, and stuff like that. And then just listening. The other one I was thinking I could really participate in a way that I enjoy. But why don't you take that on? Yeah. We can put it up on Facebook now, before the shows even hit the YouTube. Maybe that can be one of our first challenges out there. If you're having a party, who are 10 composers that you would want to have at your party and why? Yeah. I think that'd be a good one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is... You are. I am Dr. Mark.
Elmer.
And we are Mark and Elmer's Piano Scene Investigations.
Sorry, we'll get this right.
We'll get it right. We're going to get it all right. PSI. Just remember that.
Okay.
We'll eventually have all kinds of merchandise.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully.
Everybody, I hope you have a good week. Ideally, we're going to broadcast these things weekly as we get some collected and stuff, but it's been an ideal for months.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.